Hey everyone, I apologize for the technical difficulties and starting about a minute late. Welcome to the Stadium Pulse, a college football show where we will only, and I mean only, be talking about college football every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. We are about 10 days, 10, 11 days from the college football season. I am just so excited. I mean, like, it's going to be what every single person that talks about college football is going to say is, oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait for the games to actually get here. But there's still so many things to talk about. We could talk about John Mateer potentially placing bets on Venmo as a joke. It's a joke, guys. You know that good old joke where you say sports gambling after a major USC versus UCLA game just a day later. You got to pay your buddy. You have Joel Klatt saying we are in 2025 and you pay players. So we are still pulling up Venmo receipts from 2022 when a collegiate athlete is in college and he is betting on games. There has to be a hard line on that. I completely disagree with the notion that, well, they're getting paid and we've already broken all these morals and rules around college football. Why should we stop now? Why do we have to bring up receipts from 2022 about betting? Because it's betting. It's always been taboo for players to do that. I'm sorry. I'm already getting into the weeds of it. I'm already getting excited. I just want to say thank you. We've seen some growth on this channel. We've seen some growth on TikTok. And truthfully, I really do appreciate it. If you're watching back this podcast, or if you stop in and end up rewatching it, leave a comment, leave a like. You know, it's what's going to be the life of this channel, and it's truly appreciated. I love interacting with you guys, even though I forget that Prentice, the wide receiver that is now at Baylor, and my notes were wrong, and I said he was at Alabama still. It's completely fine. We have three main topics to talk about today. We're going to start it out talking about Florida. Florida is going to be a very fun thing to talk about because I talked about Billy Napier and the pressure that he's under, but I want to talk about the team a little bit more, as they are the top team, I would say, probably during this offseason in terms of hype and the narratives around them. It's just, they're one of the biggest teams to talk about this summer. I would also say that we're going to be talking about hot takes. Everyone loves hot takes. It's hard not to like a hot take. It's supposed to be hot, fresh out of the oven, 150 degrees to the touch. We have plenty of hot takes to talk about, and these are going to be steaming. Then we are going to talk about who is the team to beat in college football, or is there even a team to beat? Let's talk about Florida. What defines success for Florida in 2025? A simple question that does not have a simple answer, because success is not one that you can immediately apply a win total to off the top of your head without using any context. And the context that I'm talking about is we are looking at the number one team in terms of strength of schedule. It's a gauntlet. You are trying to find wins to get even to 8, and that's difficult and not even guaranteed. You are having a coach and a quarterback in a huge pivotal year that will define their careers. You know, not so much for DJ Lagway, because if this crashes and burns, he can easily hop in the portal and find success elsewhere because he's that good of a talent. But Billy Napier, Sunbelt Billy, this is it for him. So what would be successful? Because I think that's all they need is a successful season. Is that a college football playoff spot? Is that just getting to 8 wins? Is it winning 7 games, but the wins that they did get were against major contenders in the big old college football world? These are the things I want to talk about. Because we talked about Billy Napier and last season and how they went on a run to finish the year. They beat Ole Miss. They beat LSU. Though these weren't heavy hitters, although I think Ole Miss was a major win for them, though they didn't make the college football playoff, it's what held them out. And Florida, after how bad their season was, getting, B2A, I'm not going to say it, but B2A with Miami and Texas A&M, Graham Mertz goes out. You're putting in a true freshman quarterback against one of the most difficult schedules in the country, and you're able to string along some wins to give you hope going into next season, because Billy Napier was on the chopping block. There was already edits being put out about Lane Kiffin being the next Florida head coach. So what can we look at for 2025? Well, we have a fantastic offensive line. We have a fantastic defensive line. We have a defense overall that is littered, and I mean littered with senior talent, veteran talent that have seen the ugly side of Florida football and want to make it better. That is a type of hunger that you are not able to teach. It's something that Kirby Smart himself has said that has been a challenge for him, is finding those players that have another gear of hunger, of wanting to see winning football. It's something that when you do win football games, it's hard to recreate that same level of intensity. And it sounds like Florida has that. Florida also has a talented running back who I have as the breakout player in the entire SEC. I wouldn't say SEC. Let me backtrack. I would say the breakout player for Florida this season isn't going to be DJ Lagway. It's not going to be Eugene Wilson. I think it's going to be Jaden Baugh. Their true freshman, now true sophomore running back who led the team in rushing last season is a baller. We're talking about a powerful running back. And when you think of power, you think of these guys that aren't able to move that well. They can get those extra yards through contact, but they're not going to be able to evade, some of the faster players on the defensive side of the ball. Jaden Baugh is not that. He is a guy that was able to return kicks. He is a dynamic player with the ball in his hands. And with some of the problems that Florida has had in fall camp with those injuries, I'm starting to believe a little bit more that Jaden Baugh is going to be the guy that can win them their early games. Josh Pate said it, where he was saying, what is Florida going to be able to do in these early games with these injuries, where they are dealing with some challenges in the wide receiver room? DJ Lagway is going to need some time to ramp up. They have to win ugly, and they have the tools and capabilities to win a 17-10 game, a 1st-20 type of game, because they have a veteran defense that I mentioned is very dynamic and full of talent from young to veterans. There's so much good to like about their defense, and their offensive line is, I would argue, the biggest strength, the biggest known commodity on this offense overall. And as long as Billy, as a coach, which that has been my biggest question outside of the health of a lot of their star players, what does this coaching staff look like on Saturdays? I think that's a fair question to ask, because we've seen the good, we've seen the bad. We've seen a lot more bad than good. The good was last year. You outdueled Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. You outdueled Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers. But you also have some real bad marks where you got outdueled by Mario Cristobal, a coach that I think is very good at talent acquisition, but head-to-head on the battle of Saturday, I have questions. I'll keep it as light as possible. I have questions about that. And I think Billy Napier himself, I have questions about the staff and what is going to happen when we actually get into the line of fire of a Saturday game. So what are the guarantees that Florida needs and what would be successful? What would success look like for Florida this season? I think they have a 4-win buffer. Mississippi State, Kentucky, and 2 out-of-conference games that will not matter. South Florida is one that I'm not just going to completely disregard. I'm mentioning them now. They're a well-coached team, but at the end of the day, it's still South Florida. I think these are must-win games. You got the 4 wins. I found them in the schedule. Unless you're losing to Mississippi State and Kentucky, these are the next 4 that I think you have to win. You have to beat Miami, which I understand is a tall task for one of the more talented teams in the country. A lot of unproven talent, a lot of room to grow for their side on the defensive side of the ball. But they do have Carson Beck, a veteran quarterback, and they still just overall have a lot of talent. I think the same could be said for Tennessee, who walks into the swamp. You've been able to beat Tennessee consistently in the swamp. And then Florida State. Those are your must-wins. And we're now at 7. Leaving, this is where your ceiling is defined by, are these games right here. Texas walks into the swamp. That's the easy first one that comes to mind that you potentially could win. I think this is going to be a challenging game for Texas. These are all coulds. I think they could potentially win 2 or 3 of these games, maybe even 4. I do not see a sweep in any kind of capacity because these games are really tough. Speaking of which, at LSU, to kick off your conference play at Death Valley before you play anybody else is brutal. You have Georgia, obviously, in Jacksonville, and then at Ole Miss and at Texas A&M. Now, you could argue there might be a gap between the first 3 that I just talked about with UGA, Texas, and LSU. But at Ole Miss, with that offense, I do have questions about their defense. That could be a high-scoring game. But in a shootout, you don't want to go head-to-head with a guy like Lane Kiffin, especially with what you did to them last year. And then for Texas A&M, Kyle Field, you have DJ Lagway virtually coming home because Texas A&M was the second team that he was potentially going to pick in this recruiting process, paired with the fact that they embarrassed him with Marcel Reed. Now, DJ Lagway didn't play until like the last couple of minutes, but there's some motivation for Florida to now walk into their stadium and get their lick back, but it's still a very difficult game. That's 5 games. 5, am I counting that right? Yeah, that's about 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Apologies. I can count. I promise. I'm not that dumb. Close to it, though. I will say, if your floor is about 7, it needs to be 7. Let me say that. The floor could be 5 and 7. The floor could be worse. I will say, for what defines success, the floor is 7, and we'll add 1 more. So you need to get to 8. Anything past 8, I think, is a successful year. If you get to 9 wins with this schedule, I think you make the college football playoff. Point blank, period. I think Florida, it's so tough because you're banking on so many injuries to go your way, and they've already not gone your way. If I said I wasn't concerned, I'd be lying. But we could talk about Florida for an entire 30 minutes. Let's talk about some hot takes. Everyone has a hot take going into the college football season. If you have a hot take, I want to hear it, and I want to be able to react to it on the show and tell you either how smart you potentially are or how dumb this take is. But it'd be wrong for me to judge hot takes without telling you some of mine. And I will tell you right now, these are going to be relatively unhinged because hot takes need to be. I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you, I don't know, Georgia's going to win the national championship because Georgia is not that high compared to the rest of the field in terms of national championship odds. I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you, oh, yeah, I think Oklahoma is going to make the college football playoff, and that's going to be my steaming hot take, even though it's been one of the more popular takes across the entire offseason in terms of the dark horse team. I'm not going to pick the popular ones. These are going to be relatively unhinged. First hot take I want to say here, Texas A&M and Georgia are both going to have 1,000-yard receivers. Now, I'm pausing for effect because you may say, well, that's oddly specific. Why these teams? Why did he choose these 2 teams to just get 1,000 yards from a receiver? Well, Texas A&M, here's some trivia for you. Who was the last Texas A&M wide receiver to get to 1,000 yards? I'll give you a hint. It is in 2016. And it was Josh Reynolds. Something that I have sneakily been following for the better part of, we're getting close to a decade at this point. Texas A&M has just not been very good at the wide receiver position. I mean, they were in the 90s in terms of passing yards last season. You had Noah Thomas be your leading receiver, and he was, I believe, 22nd, not in the country, in the entire SEC. Your number 1 receiving leader was 22nd in a conference that doesn't even have 22 teams. So multiple wide receivers were ahead of them for other teams. And I think it'll be different when you have Casey Concepcion, Mario Craver. I think these guys are just going to rack up yards. All the returns about Texas A&M's wide receiver core that has been projected to improve looks to be the part. And that is with I think, the best rushing attack in the SEC. I expect one of those wide receivers to break out barring injury. Now, the more common one that is a trivia fact is, who was the last UGA wide receiver or even tight end, just a receiver in general, to get to 1,000 yards? We are looking at 2002, which is even worse than what we have with Texas A&M. Over 20 years at this point, which is crazy to think about, that Brock Bowers never got to 1,000 with Stetson Bennett. It's not like they were passing the ball over the place, but it's still crazy to think about. I think a guy like Zachariah Branch could do it. I just expect, even though they are technically downgrading in the quarterback talent passing the ball, I think it could happen this year. It's one of those things where when you expect it to happen, it doesn't happen. When it doesn't become the expectation, that's when it does. I think they did upgrade in the wide receiver room. I think there was multiple chances that could have happened. They just dropped the football last season. There was some beautiful balls that, Carson Beck was throwing, and they just got dropped. If they are just caught, they could potentially be in this conversation. And it could be a hot take within itself if I just said a UGA wide receiver was to go for 1,000. But, as one late great person said, parlays are the devil. I'm falling for it with a UGA Texas A&M wide receiver going for 1,000. We're going with a quarterback here for the next hot take. My next hot take for the 2025 season is Ty Simpson is going to lead the SEC in passing yards. Now, I don't have Ty Simpson as my Heisman. I don't have Ty Simpson as the best quarterback in the country. This is a pure numbers prediction. Knowing what Alabama has in this wide receiver room with guys like Ryan Williams, Horton, and others, and knowing how good their offensive line is with Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer, there's just too much to like for a former 5-star quarterback that just has to put the ball into the receiver's hands. And I think Ty Simpson, being a guy that wanted to stay with Alabama, I trust, and he is one of the guys that in a quarterback battle took the job. That's an underrated fact when talking about the offseason. He took the job. He was definitive, the quarterback that is going into the season and being the guy. And I think he's going to put up incredible numbers. I think he's going to put up some really gaudy passing yards. And that's why I think he's at least going to be in contention to lead the entire SEC. I think Nussmeier's a great option here. DJ Lagway is tempting solely for the fact that he's just that talented, but I think the schedule, plus I think it's going to take a little bit for him to get the ball rolling. Same for guys like Arch Manning. I don't think Sellers is going to pass it enough. I don't think Marcel Reed is going to pass it enough. I think it really will end up coming down to Nussmeier and Ty Simpson, and I think the sneaky pick is going to be Ty Simpson just in passing yards. The next hot take I have is Ohio State, the Ohio State Buckeyes, will play at least 2 quarterbacks this season. And I'm saying not because one comes into garbage time, not because one guy just steps in while it's 60-0. I'm talking 2 starting quarterbacks, and it's going to be because of a non-injury reason. Basically meaning Julian saying, I think, will potentially play poor enough where they test the other waters, where they go see what the other side of the coin looks like. Now, this is not to say I don't think Sayin could, I'm not trying to say Sayin's going to be outright bad, because I think Sayin's talented. He has what we call one of the most quick releases I've ever seen. Lightning release. That's what everyone has talked about when talking about Julian Sayin. And this could bite me so bad by week 1 if he goes and lights up that Texas defense. But I think with the new offensive coordinator, with how close this quarterback battle is, I could see a world where maybe they lose to Texas. Maybe they lose to Penn State. And it is all chips in. We need to see the other side of the coin to potentially salvage the season and get to a college football playoff spot. That Ohio State, with all these different changes, they go test the other side. It's not going to be St. Clair. I'm blanking on the kid's name, so I apologize. I'm going to pull it up right now. St. Clair's probably going to be QB3. Oh, Keenholz. And if I butcher his name, I apologize. I think they're going to test him out. as crazy as it might be, I think they'll end up going with at least 2 starting quarterbacks this year. Will I be wrong? Probably, because I think Sayan's really talented. But to what I was talking about with Ty was he took the job. You have to take the job. You could be the favorite going into it. I think a real good example was with Jalen Hurts at Alabama. He was not seen as the favorite for the starting quarterback job, but that was never taken. And when he got his opportunity, they hit the ground running, and it was over from that point forward. I could see a world where we're in that same space because everyone assumes Sayan, as the 5-star guy transferred in from Alabama, that he's just automatically getting the job, and he probably will start against Texas. But he has not taken it by any report from Ohio State. And I could see that being a major red flag, so that's why I put them as one of my hot takes. Next hot take, second to last. My next hot take for the 2025 season is Clemson runs the table. If Clemson wins their week 1 game, this could backfire in week 1 against LSU. It could easily happen. I'm very high on LSU. But if they get past them and they look good doing it, they show that they're the real Death Valley. I see no reason why Clemson cannot run the table in the regular season. But that's not the only part of the prediction. I have them as my national title contender. So that would mean they run the full table and become the first team in the 12-team playoff to go completely undefeated. They do what Oregon had the potential of doing last year, but they don't get bounced in the first round. They win the national championship because they are set up in the ACC. Yes, there's spots against Georgia Tech. There's spots against South Carolina that they could easily lose because Georgia Tech plays a style that at any given Saturday could beat you. South Carolina has Sellers who could easily game wreck any game that he steps on a football field for. But I'm that high on Clemson. I see the story where by the end of this season, we look back and say, oh, who was the team that just had so much NFL talent? They're going to have the most guys drafted in the upcoming 2026 NFL draft, and they won the national title because that's been the trend, is these deep veteran rosters that have a ton of senior talent, a veteran quarterback with experience, and a ton of NFL talent just goes far. And I would be shocked if they dropped a regular season game outside of the LSU one. If they were to lose that game and then run the table, I would be wrong in this take, but I wouldn't feel bad about it. I'm that high on Clemson. They're my number 1 team in the country, and I think they're going to be my national championship pick. Speaking of the national championship, my last hot take for the 2025 season is the rematch. Let me restart. My last hot take for the 2025 season will be a championship rematch. The national championship will be a rematch of a regular season matchup. So what are some of the options here? Clemson and LSU, Texas and Ohio State. And then we can look through a bunch of the conference games, Alabama, LSU, Alabama, Georgia. We can go to Ohio State, Penn State. Maybe it's an interconference matchup. There's a lot of options here. So I think that the national championship, this is probably an unhinged one that is super unlikely, but that is going to be my last take for my 2025 hot takes. Let me know your thoughts. If you see this video a little bit later, I'd love to hear from you and what your hot takes are for the 2025 college football season. The last thing we will talk about today, before the sunset goes down, and I will see you guys on Thursday. Once again, I want to reiterate how much I appreciate the love that is shown on TikTok, the love that's being shown on Instagram and on YouTube. I understand these are small numbers. This is chump change to 99% of the people that make videos on YouTube. But it's the little wins that make this show so special, make the journey worth it, because we will only talk about college football around here, and that's all I'll ever want to talk about. But when we go into the 2025 season, when we start to look at everyone in the space of college football, who is the team to beat in 2025? The answer is there's no one. It's not Texas, Penn State, Alabama. You may think of a team that you think is the number one team in the country, but I could also poll 20 people and probably get damn near 20 answers. Is that exaggerated? Of course, but going into the season, I could really go 1 through 5 in the AP poll or the coaches poll and point out a major, major flaw that could stop this team from even being a top 10 or even a college football playoff team. Texas, it's what if Arch doesn't work out and the offensive line does not mesh with a lot of the new starters? What if you're able to run the football against Texas, unlike what you were able to do last year, which was not run the football? Penn State, we clearly saw they were limited with the wide receiver position, and maybe a couple of plays go against them and they're not in the college football playoff, although I think they're a lock. I'm not saying that just because these are questions that they're not going to make the college football playoff. Alabama is, what if they have quarterback issues with Ty Simpson? What if the defensive line is not as advertised? What if they're not able to run the ball? Same could be said for Georgia, who was in the hundreds in rushing the football, something that I never thought I would say about a Kirby Smart team. Ohio State, the easy one is there, just replacing so much talent. You see my point. There is so many questions for each of these teams with a ton of quarterbacks that have not started football games. They have not played college football for more than 5 starts, damn near, for all of these players. And 5 starts was a random number I pulled. Some of them have not played. I think of Julian saying, Arch Manning has started games, but barely. There's so many things that could go wrong with each of these teams. So I don't think there's a team to beat, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all. That means we have parity. That means there's so much unknown going into the season. And that's why I think there's another gear of hype. There's another level of excitement when we're talking about the 2025 college football season, because when I'm saying that there is not a team to beat going into the year, does not mean the teams that I just talked about could not be that level of good. Because to the opposite of what I'm saying, what if Arch Manning works out and the offensive line is just as dominant and the defense is the number 1 team in the country? All of a sudden, we're looking at a national championship favorite by a large margin. What if Ohio State's just a factory? Julian saying clicks, the quarterback battle is nothing to worry about. You have 2 of the best players in the entire country in Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. What if Ty Simpson works out and it's just a turnkey with Ryan Grubb, and you have one of the best offenses in the country and one of the best secondaries and defenses overall? They become a national championship favorite. Penn State, what if the early reports that their wide receiver room clicked and it represents that on the field, and Drew Allar takes the step that everyone has been projecting him to take in terms of a true gunslinging quarterback that we know he has the talent to be that? They become a national championship favorite with all the things and pieces that they return. Even could be said for CJ Carr in Notre Dame. There's so much to be excited about in this college football season. I implore that, because I don't want this topic to be, oh, Tegan is saying that there is no team to beat, so there's no elite teams. There's the potential to be some all-time teams this upcoming season. But going into this year, you cannot definitively tell me there's a team to beat, because I think when people talked about, and myself included, said, does Texas really deserve the number 1 overall, AP poll and coaches poll position going into the season? I got 200 comments telling me a bunch of different answers. And that just shows me that there is, so many people that do not believe that the AP poll is right, which is not an uncommon occurrence, but usually you get a sense of agreement with maybe even 2 teams, 1 to 2. There's people that believe the national championship, back-to-back champion potentially. Ohio State is the simple way of playing. The reigning national champions should be number 1 because they won the national championship last year. I could run around in circles, but I get down to like the 6th best team in the country that has an argument for number 1. I think of like Clemson. I think Alabama has an argument to be number 1, and they were lower than Oregon. That's the point. There's so much parity by 1 through 9. I think once we get to the top 10 team, that's where you get some complications. Like, I don't think Miami is a top 10 team. We'll react to the AP poll on Thursday. Yeah, I want to hear, if you are listening to this, who is your number one team in the nation? Or do you have a team that is just so clearly better than everyone else? I'll tell you right now, Clemson is my number one team. I released my preseason poll on my socials, as you can see listed down below, at Tegan Randolph on most socials. But that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching the Stadium Pulse. Here, this is all we do is college football. So it would mean the world to me if you left a like, comment, share, anything across the board. This show's only going to get better every single time. 1% better. Ran this solo today, and we are still going to get better every single show. So thank you so much. I'll see you guys.